The janitor who remembered fire in the cold belly of a building worth $18 billion. Silence wasn't golden, it was suspicious. A voice, sharp as broken glass, sliced through the intercom. Who's in the server room at this hour? The hallway, pristine and polished, glinted under sterile lights. Jack Morgan halted mid-step, mop handle clutched in his calloused hands, heartbeat skipping a beat. The server room door hung ajar, spilling light across the hallway like a wound bleeding secrets. His boots squeaked softly as he inched closer, abandoning the mop as if it never belonged to him in the first place. From the surveillance booth above, another voice cracked through, tense and escalating. Room 1 for B. Unauthorized activity. Identify now. Jack didn't speak, didn't blink. He knelt beside the console like a man revisiting the ruins of a former life familiar and haunted. He wasn't supposed to know these systems, wasn't supposed to know how to trace malware. But his fingers hovered above the keyboard with a grace that betrayed years of dormant genius. He saw it instantly, an infiltration, a parasite digging into Argentech's core. Corrupted code ran down the screen like oil in water. Move, damn it, he whispered, and his fingers danced. Security protocols, data locks, emergency overrides. This wasn't janitorial work. This was resurrection. The door burst open behind him. To guards, tasers drawn. Step away from the console. Jack didn't flinch, fingers still mid-command, eyes steady. Unless you want to lose your entire IPO data set, he said softly, you need to let me finish. The guards faltered, uncertainty slicing through their bravado. A clock appeared on the screen, countdown initiated. 19. 18. Who the hell are you? One guard murmured. Jack said nothing, only typed, like he was speaking a language he hadn't used in a decade but never forgot. At 03, he struck enter. Everything went black. By sunrise, whispers turned to wildfire. The janitor hacked the system. Jack Morgan, the quiet man who wiped spills and unclogged coffee machines, was now the center of the greatest internal breach in Argent's history. 30-7 floors above, Elizabeth Monroe stood alone, the city unfurling beneath her like a mechanical beast. Storm clouds thinned over Manhattan, but her mood remained thick with suspicion. Her reflection stared back from the glass, icy and unreadable. Who is he? She asked without turning. Her assistant, Claire, fidgeted with her tablet. Jack Morgan, night janitor, no record, no social presence, doesn't even own a smartphone. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed, and yet he navigated our system like he built it. Claire nodded slowly. The IT team says if he hadn't intervened, we'd have lost months of records. Elizabeth's voice turned to stone. I don't trust heroes who show up in janitor's uniforms. Dick, I want everything on him. Below. In the locker room, scented with bleach and resignation, Jack sat alone, his reflection warped in the dented metal of his locker, hands still trembling not from fear, but memory. The door creaked. Dad. Emily stood in the doorway, small and solemn, clutching a paper bag. I made you breakfast. You didn't come home. Her eyes darted to the mop in the corner. Did they yell at you again? Jack tried to smile. It's just work, sweetheart. But Emily was no ordinary 10-year-old. Her voice was soft but resolute. You're not just a janitor. I saw what you did. She held up her tablet. A grainy video played, his hands on the keyboard, the countdown freezing, the screen blacking out. Jack's heart stumbled. You can't show this to anyone. He said gently, urgently, promise me. Her lip trembled. But they think you're the bad guy. Why won't you tell them the truth? Jack knelt before her, cupping her small shoulders. Because sometimes doing the right thing doesn't get you applause. It just gets you peace. She blinked at him. Then I'll tell them for you. That afternoon, the elevator doors opened to the basement with a hiss. In walked Elizabeth Monroe, her heels clicking like a countdown of their own, poised, sharp, untouchable. So, you're Jack Morgan, she said coolly. Jack leaned on his broom. Depends on who's asking. I'm the one deciding whether you keep your job or leave in handcuffs. Her gaze bore down on him. Why were you in the server room? Jack looked at her, really looked. Not at the heels or the authority, but at the woman behind the armor, because someone had to stop the bleeding. Your system was under siege. She raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting the janitor saw what our entire tech team missed? No, he said softly. I'm saying that the man who cleans up the mess sometimes knows exactly where it started. A flicker of something uncertainty perhaps crossed her face before her walls snapped back up. This isn't a movie, Mr. Morgan. Jack smiled faintly. Maybe not, but sometimes the truth's dramatic enough. As she turned to leave, her heels echoed like punctuation. You'll hear from me soon. Don't wander far. Emily tugged at his sleeve as he walked outside. Who was she? Jack looked up at the towering glass fortress. Someone who's about to learn I'm not who she thought I was. The rain had stopped, but the city glistened with its memory gutters whispering. Sidewalks glimmering silver under the fragile morning sun. Jack sat in their tiny third-floor walk-up, black coffee in hand. Emily stirred her cereal, silent, thoughtful. Do you miss it? She asked suddenly. Miss what? The thing you did before the mop. Jack stared through the fogged window. I miss who I was when I did it. Then why don't you go back? He exhaled a tired laugh. Because the world doesn't always let you come back. Sometimes it leaves the door open just enough to remind you you're not welcome. Emily scowled. That's not the kind of world I want to grow up in. Jack looked at her and saw her. Brave, clear-eyed, unbending, 10 years old, and already more courageous than most. And that terrified him. 10 years ago, Jack had everything. Patents, conferences, a corner office, and Colin Hart a best friend and business partner. Together they built Novadini, one of the first AI systems for predictive finance. But power draws predators. A breach, a leak, stock crashes. Colin called, panicked. We can fix this. But Jack's voice cracked. What did you do? By morning, Colin had vanished. Jack took the fall. No one looked for the truth. Jack stopped offering it. He lost his career, his reputation, his wife. Only Emily remained. And still no one knew the full story until now. Back at Argent, Elizabeth flipped through Jack's file. It was empty where it should have been full. To clean, to invisible. No credit card, no license renewal, no trace since 2015. Claire's voice was hushed. People don't disappear like that unless they're hiding or protecting something. Later that night, Elizabeth walked the Argentec Museum lined with portraits of innovation. She stopped before a photograph from 2009 for men in polos, young and radiant. One of them, Jack Morgan. Another, Colin Hart. Got you, she whispered. The next morning, Jack braced for whispers and suspicion. Instead, he was met with sit-along glances laced with respect. Someone had talked. He knew who. In the break room, Emily sat with interns, tablet in hand. You filmed it? Jack asked. She grinned. You told me not to show anyone, so I sent it to someone who wasn't just anyone. Claire entered, then Elizabeth. Mr. Morgan, Elizabeth said. My office. Now, there, in her bergamot-scented fortress, Elizabeth cut to the chase. Novadini, 2009. Colin Hart's partner, the man who vanished. Jack nodded slowly. I didn't vanish. I was erased. Then why didn't you fight? Because I had a daughter to raise. The truth was too heavy to carry. In one hand while holding hers with the other. Her voice softened. Barely. Colin works for me now. I trusted him. Do you still? Silence. You think I came back to get revenge? He asked. I didn't. I came to survive. But when I saw that breach, I remembered who I used to be. Elizabeth exhaled slowly. What if I told you the company's still bleeding quietly from the inside? Jack gave her a look she'd never forget. Then maybe your janitor has one last cleanup in him. That night, Jack stood at Emily's doorway, watching her sleep beneath star-shaped shadows. I don't know where this goes, kiddo, he whispered. But if I'm going back in, I'm doing it right this time. Back at his desk, he pulled out a battered USB, a relic of the man he used to be. Not out of vengeance, but memory. He plugged it in. A single line of code blinked on the screen. Legacy only ends when you let it. Jack smiled, and the fire, long buried beneath 10 years of silence and mop water, finally roared back to life. The janitor's truth, maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop hiding. Time to begin peeling back the layers of silence, one painful truth at a time. Jack Morgan stood inside the freight elevator, his broom slung casually over one shoulder. Like a soldier's weapon, there was something unassuming about him. Work boots scuffed, shirt faded, name tag peeling at the edges. But in his stillness, in the calm defiance of his posture, there was a storm barely restrained. You know, what's funny? Jack said, his tone light, but laced with an edge sharp enough to draw blood. People never meet your eyes when your job title's in block letters on your chest. Across from him stood Elizabeth Monroe, Argentech's untouchable CEO, impeccable as ever, arms crossed, dark sunglasses shielding her gaze even though they were miles below sunlight. Silence radiated from her like a blade pressed to glass, controlled, calculated. The elevator began its slow ascent. Jack tilted his head, voice still clipped with dry humor. If I ever saw you again, I figured you'd want my resignation. Not a private conversation. Elizabeth didn't blink. I don't ask for things, she said. I summon them. Jack smirked faintly, and yet, here we are, breathing the same air. With a mechanical chime, the elevator door slid open onto the executive floor, pristine marble, brushed steel, silence soaked in power. The atmosphere itself seemed polished, sterile, intimidating. Elizabeth moved forward, her voice like a command carved in glass. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. They passed towering windows that revealed Manhattan beyond a glittering monument to ambition. An illusion, then came the strike. You were there, she said, straight to the heart of it. At the breach. Jack didn't flinch. You already knew that. I want to hear it from you. He stopped mid-step, turning toward her. And I want to know why a CEO with a cybersecurity army at her fingertips suddenly wants a janitor's version of events. Elizabeth's chin lifted slightly, her tone cooled. Because I know the look of a liar. And your eyes didn't blink. There was the crack in her carefully frozen mask. Jack looked at her, really looked. Not the power suit or the flawless hair pulled taut like armor. He listened instead to the weariness buried in her voice. Not cold. Exhausted. What do you want from me? Jack asked. The teasing gone down. Elizabeth hesitated for a breath, a heartbeat. I want to know if I've been betrayed by the man who helped build this empire. Hart. Jack exhaled slowly. Of course, Doc Colin. He's been with me from the beginning, she said. He helped take Argent from a startup to a dynasty. But lately, the data, it's been a perfect, and code doesn't lie. But people do. Jack leaned on his broom like a knight on a staff. You already know the answer. You just want someone else to speak it aloud. Her silence was confirmation. Then why me? He asked. She looked to the skyline, where sunlight fractured through the clouds, stretching long shadows across the towers. Because people with nothing left to lose, she said softly, are usually the only ones who tell the truth. Jack's expression changed. Subtle, deep. You're wrong about that. She turned to him, questioning. I have everything to lose, he said. Her name is Emily. Something shifted in Elizabeth's face. A memory, a scar. My husband died of cancer 6 years ago, she said. All I had left was this company. I built it like a fortress. No doors, no windows, just walls I thought would keep me safe from ever feeling powerless again. Her voice trembled, but only barely, and last night, she continued, a man with a mop walked right through all of it, like it was paper. Jack blinked. He hadn't expected that. Elizabeth stood straighter. I'm not asking for a partner or a savior. I'm asking for someone who's built something that mattered and almost lost it all. Jack nodded. Then you're asking for the janitor. A faint smile touched her lips. Maybe I am. Later that afternoon, Jack stood alone in the janitor's closet. A bare bulb flickered overhead, casting sharp shadows. The scent of pine cleaner hung in the air. He stared into a crooked mirror. bolted to the wall, and barely recognized the man staring back. Grizzled, worn, not broken. But tired of pretending he hadn't been out, the door creaked. Emily peeked in. "Did she fire you?" Jack shook his head. "She asked me to help." Emily tilted her head. "That sounds worse." He chuckled dryly. "You're not wrong." She stepped forward, hiding something behind her back. "What's that?" he asked. She revealed a shiny, retro lunchbox. "Captain Truth," emblazoned in bold comic lettering. "It's yours now," she said proudly. "You're kind of like a superhero." Jack laughed, not from humor, but from the achy fullness in his chest. "Captain Truth, huh? Not all heroes wear capes," she said solemnly. "Some carry buckets." He hugged her gently, the lunchbox pressed between them. "If I do this," he whispered, "it won't be for revenge or a second chance. It'll be for you. So that one day, you know your dad didn't just clean up after messes, he tried to stop them from happening." Emily smiled up at him, eyes shining. "Then be brave." He nodded. "Brave it is." That night, Jack sat alone in the dim data archives, a forgotten chamber of humming machines and fading legacy in his hand, an old USB battered, stubborn, still warm with memory. He slid it into the port and stared at lines of code from a life he had buried. A noise broke the silence. Elizabeth, she entered, holding a folded piece of paper, a photo, black and white, for young men, arms slung over shoulders, wide smiles full of promise. "Novadini, a beginning, not yet a curse. You haven't changed much," she said. "You need better glasses," he muttered. She smiled briefly. "Would you trust that man today?" Jack stared at the photo. "No," he said softly. "Not what he believed people were capable of. He thought loyalty came by default. It doesn't. It's earned, and it's fragile." Elizabeth lowered her voice. "Then help me figure out who in this company still deserves it." He nodded. "Not as the janitor, not as the ghost of Novadini, but as Jack Morgan." The rain returned that night, tapping against Argontech's windows like 1,000 memories begging. Entry. Jack sat, lit by the blue glow of code, eyes narrowing not at syntax, but the rhythm of it. Code had fingerprints, distinct, personal, arrogant. He saw it in the heart of the machine learning model land echo. Hard. Same rhythm, same arrogance. Jack muttered. Behind him, a knocked out Elizabeth stepped in, no pretense, holding the paper cups. "Thought you'd still be here." She handed him one. Their fingers brushed. He took a sip. Didn't leave a trail. He left. A signature. She peered over his shoulder. "What am I looking at?" An echo. A ghost line that mimics projected revenue. Inflates it, just enough to go undetected. Double quotes. Her voice cracked. "That's fraud. If your IPO goes public with this in place," Jack said, "you'll be explaining to the SEC for years." She stared at the screen, stunned. "He used my company, my trust, to build a lie." Jack looked at her gently. "You gave him power. He gave you results. That's Wall Street math, loyalty, until it costs too much. Why now?" she whispered. "Why sabotage this now?" "Because men with nothing to lose get dangerous." He paused. "And Colin doesn't walk away. He erases his footprints. After he burns the bridge." She turned, folding her arms. "And what does that make you?" "The ghost who haunts him." Jack's face didn't shift. "No, I'm the one who remembers the man before the suits, before the lies became strategy." "So what now?" she asked. Jack gave her a small, steady smile. "Now we walk across the bridge with a torch and show everyone what's been hiding underneath." The next morning, Elizabeth convened an emergency meeting with the audit team. Jack stood silently in the back, still in his janitor's jacket. Elizabeth's voice was unflinching. "What I'm about to show you doesn't leave this room." One board member scoffed. "With respect, we're a week from IPO. We need deliverables, not drama." Jack finally spoke. "Would you rather delay a month or spend 5 years explaining to the SEC why your AI was generating fake forecasts?" Silence. He stepped forward, plugged in the flash drive. "This," he said, pointing to the screen, "is your model's heartbeat. The screen highlighted subtle segments, and this is the ghost in the system. An algorithm hidden beneath secondary functions, only triggered during report exports. He turned. Written by Colin Hart. Gasps. Disbelief. It's not impossible. Jack said quietly, it's invisible. That's what makes it dangerous. Elizabeth let the silence breathe before delivering her order. Pull Colin's access. Lock every data port. Nothing leaves this company unless Jack Morgan clears it. Murmurs rippled. But he's not. He's exactly who we need right now. Elizabeth cutting. That evening, Jack stood on the rooftop, city lights like stars below. Elizabeth joined him. No heels, no armor, just a wool coat and weary eyes. You shook them, she said. The board, me. Jack stared into the horizon. Sometimes people don't need heroes, just someone to jolt them awake. She nodded. Why didn't you speak up back then, at Novadini? Jack's eyes darkened. I had a 3-year-old and a funeral to plan. Colin gave them a villain. I took the fall, because surviving felt like enough. A beat. But Emily's older now. She deserves to know what truth costs and what it's worth. Elizabeth whispered, she's lucky. Jack smiled faintly. I'm the lucky one. That night, in their small apartment, Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing. She held up her picture, Jack with a mop in one hand, a sword in the other. You're like a knight, she said. Jack laughed. A knight with back pain. She grinned. But you still fight for the good guys. Jack looked at her, tears stinging the corners of his eyes. Not just for the good guys, he said softly, for the truth. Asterisk clean from within, the world was quiet, cloaked in the hush of midnight. When Jack sat down at his desk, a place more confessional than workspace, he pulled out a fresh notepad, pages unsullied, full of possibility, and with a steady hand, he wrote 3 simple, sacred words, clean from within, because some of the messes a man carried couldn't be mopped off a floor. Some were encoded into memory, buried in silence, and left festering in forgotten lines of code. But tonight, Jack was ready to face them, across town, in the gleaming glass bones of Argon Tech's headquarters. A different kind of tension simmered taut, silent and electric. The boardroom felt airless, suffocating beneath the weight of what was unsaid. A week before the company's IPO, the executive team sat still as statues, their eyes flickering with dread as they scrolled through preliminary audit logs, each revelation more damning than the last. Jack stood quietly at the back, anonymous in his janitor's uniform, a gray shell that hid more than just his past. In his hands, he clutched a black folder not heavy in weight, but dense with consequence. At the head of the table sat Elizabeth Monroe, CEO of Argon, spine straight, eyes forward, her hands folded tightly beneath her chin like she was holding herself together. Across the room, an empty chair drew the eye. Colin Hart, the company's co-founder and CTO, had failed to show on a business call. His assistant had claimed. Jack didn't believe in that kind of coincidence anymore. Are we absolutely certain this was intentional? Asked Mara Wu, head of compliance, her voice sharp but shaking. She tapped the screen with her pen, as though touching it might shake loose a better truth. Jack stepped forward, his voice low but firm. It wasn't a miscalculation. It was deception, deliberate and surgical. The code was written to manipulate projections without triggering alarms. Why not just alter the reports manually? Someone asked. Jack's smile was tired, laced with irony, because human errors raise suspicion. But when a machine lies smoothly, seamlessly, people assume it's just being smarter than they are. Elizabeth finally spoke, her voice slow, quiet, and scorching. We trusted Colin to build a brain that couldn't lie. Instead, he taught it to cheat better than a person ever could. A heavy silence hung in the air. Then Jack said, almost as if to himself, a system reflects its creator. That night, Jack returned to his apartment with a headache that pulsed behind his eyes like the echo of guilt. Emily met him at the door, paint smudged across her fingers, eyes gleaming with secret joy. I made something, she declared. Jack kicked off his boots, the exhaustion in his bones masked by the gentle mask of fatherhood. Should I be nervous? She led him to the kitchen table, where a model tower stood tall, crafted from cereal boxes, cardboard, and hundreds of tiny toothpicks. It was a replica of Argonne's headquarters. For stories high, at the top stood a stick figure holding a mop. Jack let out a stunned laugh. Is that me? Emily nodded. It's the truth. You, standing up there, guarding it? He sat down slowly, overwhelmed by the care in every corner, every toothpick placed by love. Why am I at the top? He asked. She shrugged with the simplicity only a child can offer, because that's where the light comes in. His throat tightened. You think I'm brave? She grinned. No, I know you are. Later, as the city curled into sleep, Jack sat on the fire escape, the hum of old guilt fading beneath the rhythm of keystrokes. His fingers moved across the laptop like they were coming home, like a pianist returning to a melody he hadn't played in years. You're passed into the mirror server. Elizabeth's voice came through the earpiece, professional but tamed, with something gentler. Use it like the original. Just don't trigger Colin's audit flags. Jack smirked. Back in the day, you couldn't even write a for loop. Her reply was dry. Back in the day, you still had hair. He chuckled then still. There's something in the logs, something the auditors missed. Colin built a phantom account, a shadow user that mimics admin activity and wipes it. Tracks every 30 minutes. Elizabeth's tone turned razor sharp. Are you saying someone's in the system right now? I'm saying someone never left, and they've been watching everything. Silence. Then, softly, then let's give them something worth watching. The next morning, a company-wide bulletin announced a staged penetration test, a simulated breach to evaluate real-time readiness. It was a lie, and also not. Jack had written the worm himself, feeding it just enough vulnerability to look real. He watched from the underground server room, shadows dancing on the concrete as the trap waited. 32 minutes in, it twitched. Gotcha, Jack whispered. The phantom stirred, slipped through the cracks, and infiltrated an old AI module one Colin had personally embedded. Then it turned back, like prey becoming predator. Jack's screen flashed red. They're trying to trace me, he said into the mic. They're close. Then just as suddenly it vanished. The ghost was gone, but now it knew he was watching. That night, Elizabeth called him into her office. The lights were low. A glass of ginger ale shimmered in her hand, jazz playing faintly in the background like memory. If this goes public before the IPO, our valuation drops in half, she said. If we wait and get caught, it's federal prison. Jack took a sip, the burn in his throat nothing compared to the one in his chest. So we're choosing which poison to drink. Elizabeth looked at him, then not as a CEO, but as a woman stripped down to the truth. No, she said, we're choosing how much of ourselves we can live with losing. He studied her. Why me? Why trust me with this? Because, she said, no hesitation. You're the only person here who's already lost everything and still showed up with your soul intact. His voice dropped. Truth doesn't always make you rich. She stepped closer, but it keeps you from drowning in your own reflection. And for the first time, they saw each other, past roles, past reputations, just the people who had made mistakes and still dared to hope they weren't beyond repair. At home, Jack stood before the mirror. The face looking back was older than he remembered. Not broken, just real. Emily patted him. Half asleep. Dad? Yeah. Sweetheart, did you save the tower? Jack smiled softly. Not yet, but I poked a hole in the lie. She leaned against him. That's how light gets in. Outside, a storm howled through the city like something ancient and angry. Inside, a different storm turned quieter, colder, personal. Jack stood in the innovation lab, bathed in the eerie glow of holograms. A single red message pulsed across the screen. You always blink first. Jack froze. A voice behind him, soft and haunted. Colin used to say that. Elizabeth entered, arms crossed, eyes shadowed not by makeup, but memory. I know, Jack whispered. He said it the night he disappeared. So this is personal now. It always was. You weren't just colleagues, were you? Jack breathed deeply. We built Novadini in a garage with nothing but code, caffeine, and impossible dreams. He was my brother just not by blood, and he let you fall. No, Jack said quietly. He chose to survive, and he chose to let me fall. That's worse. Elizabeth looked away. I chose him to over you without knowing what I was choosing against. You didn't choose wrong. Jack said gently, you chose the man who smiled for the cameras. I would have done the same. She looked at him, vulnerable. I don't know how to fix this. You don't fix it, he replied. You face it. That's how the truth becomes a foundation, not a fault line. And if it all collapses, then we build something better from the rubble. The next day, Jack stood before Argonne's senior engineers. No title, no suit, just a man with truth in his hands. You don't know me, he began. That's by design. He held up a faded photo, young man with big eyes and bigger dreams. I helped build one of Silicon Valley's first predictive AI firms. I was its CTO. I was also the one left behind when it imploded. Gasps, whispers. I didn't come to Argonne for revenge. Jack continued. I came for work, honest work. But when I saw our system bleeding, I couldn't just mop it up. He paused. Someone you trust is lying to the world. And if we stay silent, we become part of the lie. A young engineer raised her hand. Why should we believe you? I'm not asking you to, Jack said. I'm asking you to look, trace the code, follow the timestamps. The truth doesn't need spin. It just needs eyes that want to see. No applause, no walkouts, just quiet. The kind that comes before a storm washes everything clean. Later, Jack returned to Elizabeth's office. She was staring at a still frame from security footage, slipping into the server vault 3 nights earlier. No clearance, no record, just shadows. He knows we're closing in, she said. Then we move faster. You want to release the audit. Jack shook his head. No, we confront him. On record. In public. Elizabeth blinked. That's suicide. Jack smiled. That's justice with good lighting. 2 nights later, under bright stage lights disguised as an internal developer showcase, Jack stood on a makeshift platform. As he caught his reflection in the glass behind him, he didn't see a janitor. He saw a man finally standing in the light. He saw not a janitor, not a forgotten man in faded clothes, but a warrior wielding a blade forged from truth honed by every injustice he'd endured, and every lie he had refused to speak. And for the first time in years, Jack Morgan was ready to be seen. Inside the Argonne Tech auditorium, the air felt electric, thick with tension, like the entire room was holding its breath, waiting. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was weighty, charged with something unspoken. The event had been billed as a transparency showcase, a live unveiling of Argonne's next generation of AI, a brilliant idea once conceived by Jack himself, back when dreams were still bright and betrayal hadn't yet dulled their glow. Ironic, he thought, that this celebration of truth might now become someone's downfall. The seats were filled, press, employees, even quiet government observers wearing suits so bland they disappeared into the walls. Cameras glinted like silent eyes, microphones hung like executioners' nooses. Every detail had been choreographed down to the breath. Jack stood stage left, still wearing the janitor's jacket that had become his camouflage. His earpiece crackled softly with Elizabeth's voice. You sure about this? No, he answered, calm, but I'm done being silent. Across the stage, Hart entered. Trim suit, sculpted smile, the embodiment of charisma calculated to impress. But when his gaze landed on Jack, something inside him twitched, a microsecond of tension in his perfect facade. He took center stage. The applause was polite, but hollow. Welcome, he began, smooth as silk. Today is about pulling back the curtain. At Argonne, transparency isn't just a value, it's our competitive edge. Every line rehearsed, every smile manufactured. Colin had learned to perform integrity the way others learned to code methodically, flawlessly. Jack stepped into the spotlight, unhurried. The room noticed. Whispers flared like sparks. Colin quipped, The slick, well, Mr. Morgan, still, keeping the floors clean. Jack took the mick without flinching. No more mop, he said, voice even. Just the truth. And the room finally froze. I was one of the co-founders of Nova Dini. Jack continued, voice strong, reverberating, colon hard, and I built our first AI in a basement on 12th and Pine. We were kids trying to change the world, and we did, but we forgot to teach it the one thing that could have saved us. He let the moment hang ethics. A hush, a shift, people leaned in, something waking in their eyes. Jack turned, gesturing to the screen behind him. Over the last 3 weeks, I traced a code signature, one that's been manipulating forecasts, doctoring metrics, falsifying earnings. That signature belongs to Colin Hart. Colin let out a forced laugh, one that trembled beneath its polish. You're delusional. Jack didn't blink. Elizabeth? A new screen flickered the life raw code. Highlighted anomalies, timestamps, audit trails, undeniable. Jack pointed, unwavering. This shadow account bypassed internal controls, inflated revenue projections by over 6%, and rerouted data to an offshore server. Accessed using Colin's credentials. Colin's jaw tightened, eyes flickering. You built a performance giant, Jack said, but hollowed it out. With lies, every investor, every employee, every ideal we stood for has been standing in the shadow of what should have been. Colin took a step closer, voice venomous. This is a setup. You're bitter. You got left behind. Jack leaned in, his truth sharper than any accusation. No, I walked away from a lie to raise a daughter who wouldn't have to live one. The silence turned sacred. Cameras caught every breath. Elizabeth emerged from the wings. No spotlight, no fanfare, just conviction. I believed in you, she said, voice stripped bare. You taught me loyalty, but you asked me to be loyal to numbers that weren't real. I won't let this company bleed for your ambition. Colin spun to the crowd, desperate. You think this saves you? The feds will tear you apart too. This isn't a coding glitch. It's sabotage. Elizabeth didn't flinch. No, she said. Sabotage is what you do when you're afraid of the truth, and we're done being afraid. Security moved forward. Colin didn't struggle. He just looked at Jack one last time, something like resignation in his eyes. You were always the better coder, he murmured, but you never understood power. Jack's reply was quiet, but unshakable. Power without integrity isn't leadership, it's theft. That night, the city exhaled. The headlines came fast. Colin Hart under federal investigation, IPO frozen, investors stunned. But our Tech survived not by denying the truth, but by revealing it. Jack stood on the rooftop, the city lights shimmering like quiet witnesses. Elizabeth joined him, to coffees in hand. No pretense, just presence. You broke the silence, she said. Sometimes silence becomes complicity, he replied. They gazed out over Manhattan, its glowing windows like a constellation of second chances. I made mistakes, she admitted, eyes vulnerable, ignored signs, used work as armor. We all were something, Jack said. Mine just had my name stitched on the front. She laughed softly, then turned to him, sincere. You could walk away now. You've already done the impossible. Jack hesitated. Then, with a quiet fire, maybe it's time I stopped mopping floors and started rebuilding foundations. Her nod was slow. I'd like you to stay. As what? He asked. She smiled gently. Advisor of integrity. He chuckled. Can I wear my janitor boots to meetings? You'd better. They stood quietly. Then she said, almost too softly, you changed how I see people, Jack. And you reminded me why truth matters, he said, especially when it costs something. She reached for his hand, not romantically, but honestly, grounded, real. And in that simple gesture, a story once shadowed by lies finally stepped into the light. 3 days later, the media storm subsided. The world moved on, algorithms chasing fresher disasters. But something inside Argon Tech had shifted. Not loudly but deeply. Jack sat in the company cafe, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, still in his janitor jacket by choice now. People greeted him by name. Some younger engineers looked his way with quiet awe, not reverence, but something rare respect. Elizabeth slid into the seat across from him. Jeans, sweater, no heels, no entourage, just her. The board approved a full internal overhaul. She said, "We're calling it the Integrity Framework." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Catchy. I borrowed it from someone." She smirked. He grew thoughtful. "The code we write reflects the people we are if we don't start cleaning from within. The rot just finds a new corner." She nodded. "We want you to lead the transition. Team, officially, I never wanted the spotlight," he said, "which is exactly why it should be you." He looked at her, not the CEO mask, but the woman beneath. Tired, humble, awake. "All right," he said at last. "Let's build something that outlives us." That night, Jack returned home to find Emily asleep on the couch, Charlotte's web clutched in her small hands. He smiled. She was growing. He tucked her in, then noticed an envelope on the kitchen counter. No return address, just a New York postmark. Inside, a photo of him, Colin, and Elizabeth. Long before the lies, kids in a garage, chasing brilliance, and naively believing that genius was enough. Dot behind it, a sticky note. "You blinked last." Jack stared, not with fear but with something heavier, grief, because even villains start as dreamers, and betrayal only hurts when it's born of trust. He folded the photo, placed it in a drawer, and whispered to no one, "Goodbye, brother." Weeks later, the west wing of Argontech had been gutted to its bones. Gone were the glass nameplates, frosted doors, polished tables. In their place, whiteboards, mismatched chairs, handwritten signs. Innovation Hub, no titles, no barriers, just people. Jack stepped into the space, jeans damp from light rain, lunchbox in one hand, a box of books in the other. He looked around and felt something stir out pride, not ego but hope. That morning, the company held its first open-door roundtable. No seating charts, no scripts. Elizabeth opened the meeting. "Today isn't about postmortems. It's about ownership of mistakes, of healing, of each other." Then she turned to Jack. "No one embodies that more than the man who's been quietly cleaning our messes literally and metaphorically while we ignore the rot beneath our systems." Jack stepped forward. No notes, no polish, just presence. "I used to think silence was strength," he said, "that if I kept my head down, I'd survive. But surviving isn't living, and silence lets rot grow. A hush, the weight of truth. Redemption isn't a prize," he continued. "It's a decision every day to build something better than what broke you." One clap, then another, then a standing ovation, not for show, but for substance. Later, as Elizabeth walked him to the elevator, she asked, "Why'd you keep the jacket?" Jack smiled. "It reminds me where I started, and where are you going next?" He met her gaze. "Wherever I'm most useful." She took his hand, unexpectedly. No spectacle, just gratitude. "You saved more than a company," she said. "You saved me from becoming someone I wouldn't respect." Jack gently squeezed her fingers. Then we're even. No promises, no confessions, just the beginning of something that didn't need a name. That night, Emily stood by the window, watching the city glow like scattered fire. "Did you fix it?" she asked. He knelt beside her. "Not everything, but we turned the lights back on." She nodded. "You should tell your new job people that." He smiled. "I just might." She leaned into him, small and warm. "You're my favorite hero. You." "No." He kissed the top of her head. "Not because I win," he whispered, "but because I don't run." Outside, the city breathed. Inside, a family rebuilt. And in the hush between what had ended and what had just begun, truth didn't stand as a monument, but as a seed waiting, quietly, to grow. Asterisk Emily had made him pack a lunch, even though she knew there was a cafeteria, just in case, she'd said, slipping it into his bag with the kind of quiet insistence that carried more love than logic. Jack didn't argue. He rarely did with her Inside the innovation hub, 10 young engineers were already gathered in a loose semicircle, fingers flying over keyboards, eyes glued to screens. A few glanced up when he walked in. A couple nodded. No one stood. No one called him sir. It was exactly what he needed. Unpretentious, honest. He placed the lunchbox on a corner table and took in the room. No corporate decor. No blaring schedules or hollow slogans on the walls. Just one girl in the back, quiet and absorbed, scribbling in a spiral notebook with a purple pen. Something about her stillness drew him in. Jack walked over, lowering his voice. "What are you writing?" She looked up, shy but not scared. "Word of the day," she said, almost whispering. "I pick one each morning." He tilted his head, smiling. "What is it today?" She held the notebook up. Began. Jack inhaled softly. "That's a good one." By midday, the space hummed with a kind of gentle electricity, not frantic, not forced. A quiet storm of thought and invention. Ideas spilled like water over whiteboards, napkins, even onto the windows. No one was pitching. No one was performing. They were just building. From somewhere deeper, Claire, one of the engineers who had once been buried in the metrics-driven world of marketing AI, came up with a crooked smile. "You know this feels illegal, right?" she teased. Jack smirked, leaning back. "Only if we're doing it right." She swept her hand across the room. "You've given us something no system ever measured: permission to care. That's dangerous around here." He nodded, slowly. "Let it be dangerous. That's how healing starts." Back at his table, which looked just like everyone else's, Jack pulled out a small sketch Emily had drawn. Crayon lines showed a group of people holding hands beneath a roof. The words above them, "No one gets left behind." He pinned it to the wall. Someone noticed. Then others began pinning their own truths beside it. One read, "Truth doesn't whisper. It echoes." Another, "Fail safe. Try safe to fail," and scrawled in Sharpie, barely legible, "We don't rise by rank. We rise by lifting." That evening, when the buzz had faded and chairs began scraping softly against the floor, Jack caught a glimpse of someone standing just outside the glass wall. Elizabeth. Watching. He opened the door, an eyebrow raised. "Thought you didn't believe in ghosts." She stepped inside, hands deep in her coat pockets. "Wasn't sure if I was invited." "You always are," he replied, grinning. "Just don't expect overpriced coffee." She walked the room slowly, her eyes roaming over the notes on the walls, the tools scattered across tables, the faded exhaustion in young faces replaced with sparks of purpose. "Do you know what you've done?" she asked. Jack shrugged. "Kept the lights on." "No," she said softly. "You reminded them they were more than job titles, more than KP is. You gave them a place to belong." He looked around. "It's not about building geniuses. It's about making good people better." Her voice lowered. "Why didn't we ever build this before?" Jack paused. His voice was steady when he replied, "Because we were too busy, trying to look like success instead of being it." That night, at home, Emily sat at the kitchen table with her tutor, Evelyn. She was writing a thank you card, her tongue peeking out in concentration as she drew perfect loops in cursive. "What's the occasion?" Jack asked, setting down his bag. Emily beamed. "Miss Evelyn helped me learn all the Arabic words in our book. I wanted to say thank you the right way." Evelyn smiled. She insisted on getting every accent mark right. She might be more detail-oriented than you. Jack laughed. Terrifying, Emily handed him a small slip of paper. "I saved one for you." On it, a simple phrase written in Arabic, with its English meaning below. "Truth is the language everyone understands." Jack's heart softened. "Where'd you learn that?" Emily shrugged. "I didn't. I just felt it." He stared at her for a long moment, then pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You're going to change the world." She smiled. "Only if I get to work in your hub." Later that night, Jack sat alone in the hub, lights dimmed, whiteboard still bearing the remnants of dreams. He turned off his phone, closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel behind. He didn't feel broken. He felt Ready dot, because in this room, stripped of titles, hierarchy, and fear something new had taken root. Not just a project, a culture, one not built on code or capital or intellect, but on something rare. Courage, compassion, and the willingness to begin again. The first time someone called him Mr. Morgan without a hint of irony, Jack didn't know what to say. It was Max, a young programmer who once wouldn't have dared make eye contact running down the hallway, waving the corrupted file. Mr. Morgan, you're the only one who can help me make sense of this logic loop. Jack turned, expecting someone behind him. There wasn't. He nodded. Let's take a look. And just like that, his past stopped being an anchor and started becoming a bridge. That afternoon, Jack found Emily in the break room beside Liam Claire's 8-year-old coloring on the back of an old code printout. We're designing a robot, Emily said, that gives hugs when people feel sad. Jack chuckled. Tell your robot I'm first in line. Liam looked up. Why would a grown-up need a hug? Jack sat beside them because grown-ups forget it's okay to ask for one. Emily leaned her head against him. But you didn't forget. No, he whispered. Not anymore. That night, while tucking her in, Emily traced the long scar on his forearm with small, careful fingers. Daddy, she said quietly. How'd you get this? Jack froze. He hadn't spoken of it in years. He sat beside her on the bed, brushing hair from her cheek. It was a long time ago. I was teaching coding. One of my students pushed a fart, wanted to outsmart a system I said wasn't ready. It sparked. I jumped in before it hurt someone. Emily's eyes widened. Did it hurt? Jack's voice dropped. Not as much as what came after. She was quiet. Is that why you stopped teaching? He hesitated. Then, more certain than he'd expected, he said, No, I stopped because I blamed myself. I thought failing once meant I didn't deserve a second chance. Emily took his hand. But you teach me. Jack looked at her, something soft and breaking open inside his chest. Yes, he said, and you remind me that teaching isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when you're scared. A sniffle broke the silence. Jack turned. Elizabeth stood in the doorway, a folder clutched in her hand. She'd come to drop it off, but said nothing. She just walked in, sat beside Emily, and touched her foot gently through the blanket. He's a good teacher, she said, to all of us. Emily grinned. He makes robots that hug people. Elizabeth smiled. And he makes people feel like they matter. That's a different kind of magic. Later, as Jack walked her to the door, rain tapped softly against the window panes. She turned to him in the golden hush of the hallway. Do you ever wonder, she asked, if this is all just redemption disguised as coincidence? Jack thought for a moment. Then, no, I think redemption's a choice. But sometimes the universe sends you mirrors until you finally face one. Elizabeth gave a quiet, real laugh. You and your mirrors. You and your armor. I'm trying to take it off, she whispered. He stepped closer. No rush. Some scars are worth showing slowly. Silence bloomed between them and resolved. But rich with life, she looked down. When this all started, I thought I was losing everything. You weren't, Jack said gently. What was I doing then? He leaned in. You were making room for something better. The next morning in the hub, a new quote had appeared in red marker. Scars don't mean we broke. They mean we healed open. Below it, someone scribbled, Jack Morgan, accidental philosopher. He rolled his eyes, but he left it up not because it flattered him, but because someone had truly heard him. And in a world drunk on noise, being heard was the loudest love of all. 1 year later, the rooftop of Argent's new downtown campus shimmered beneath the sunset like warm honey. No podiums, no banners, just long wooden tables, lanterns swinging in the breeze, and the laughter of people who had survived a storm. Together, a framed Time magazine cover leaned against a glass panel. They didn't disrupt tech. They redeemed. It died in the photo. Max, Claire, Jack. Not the trio anyone expected, but exactly the one the world needed. Max, once invisible, now strategic culture liaison. Claire, once quietly brilliant, now co-leading the ethics division, and Jack still in boots, still with his lunchbox, but when he spoke now, people listened at one table. Emily passed out cake, her pigtails bouncing. She stopped beside a suited man, leaned close, and whispered that one's extra chocolate for people who used to be mean, but got better. The man blinked, then laughed, taking the plate. Elizabeth, barefoot, white summer dress fluttering, watched with misted eyes. Jack sat beside her, sipping ginger ale from a mason jar. "You realize," she said, nudging him, "this isn't normal." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Neither were we." She smiled. True, later, when the sun nearly dipped behind the city's shoulders, Jack stood and tapped his glass gently. Conversations quieted. He didn't climb anything, didn't clear his throat. "I used to think success meant proving you were the smartest in the room," he said. "Then I lost everything and ended up cleaning the rooms." A ripple of soft laughter. "But in those quiet hours, when no one saw me, I noticed something. The best people weren't the loudest. They were the ones still showing up, still helping, still believing in good, even when no one clapped for them." He looked at Emily, curled in Evelyn's lap, at Claire, eyes glassy with tears, at Elizabeth, who hadn't looked away once, and I realized maybe the rooms were never broken. Maybe we just forgot how to fill them with what mattered. He paused, and maybe this was never about changing tech. He smiled, voice low. Maybe it was about changing us. Asterisk, maybe we just forgot how to listen. Jack said softly, his voice brushing the room like the last breeze of a long summer evening. Then he paused, a small, almost bashful smile tugging at his lips. "So tonight, I just want to say thank you, not for believing in me, but for letting me believe in you." He lifted his glass slowly, reverently, as if toasting something sacred, to second chances. He said, "The messy kind, the kind forged in apology and rebuilt in truth, the kind you have to earn." Glasses lifted around the rooftop, catching the last golden flickers of the lanterns overhead. 2 second chances. No one said much after that. They didn't have to. Something in the air had shifted, something unspoken but undeniable. The celebration ebbed gently, guests filtering out in 2s and 3s, laughter softening into silence. But Elizabeth remained. She stayed behind like a shadow that chose not to fade, seated beside Jack at the very edge of the rooftop, legs dangling over the ledge, a silent witness to the skyline that stretched wide and forgiving before them. For a long while, they didn't speak. They just watched the city breathe. And then, her voice, quiet but full. "You saved us." Jack turned to her, the reflection of distant lights dancing in his tired but tender eyes. He shook his head, a small, certain gesture. "No," he said. "We saved each other, one honest truth at a time." She studied him, a softness in her gaze that hadn't been there before. Her voice trembled with something more than memory. It was gratitude laced with grief. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come back, if you'd never picked up that mop again?" He let the question linger in the quiet like a stone dropped into still water. Then he exhaled, deeply. "Maybe the world would still be spinning," he said, "but something precious would have stayed lost. Maybe not noticed at first, but lost just the same." Without a word, Elizabeth reached into her satchel and pulled out a small, cream-colored envelope. She handed it to him with both hands. Inside, nestled like a promise, was a single sheet of parchment and official letter of appointment. Jack blinked at the bold black type. Jack Morgan, Chief Steward of Human Culture and Ethics. He stared at the words for a beat too long. Then he looked up, blinking in disbelief. Is this even a real title?" he asked, lips twitching at the corners. She smirked, but her eyes were serious. "It is now." He held the letter with the kind of gentleness usually reserved for baby birds and broken hearts. Then he looked at her, full and unguarded. "You really want a former janitor in your C-suite?" She leaned in slightly, her voice unwavering. "No," she said. "I want a man who knows what it means to pick up the pieces, not just talk about them, not just pretend to understand. A man who's lived it, Something cracked open inside him, not a breaking, but a soft, long-awaited release. He folded the paper with care and slid it into the inner pocket of his jacket, like one might tuck away a love letter. "I'm in," he said simply. They sat again in silence, but this time it was warm. Not the silence of distance, but the silence of two people who had finally stopped running. After a moment, Elizabeth spoke again, her voice low, nearly a whisper. "Jack, you didn't just help us rebuild a company." She placed her hand gently over his, grounding him. "You helped me remember who I wanted to be." He turned to her, his expression raw, without armor. "And you reminded me," he said, "that I was never just a janitor." He looked down at their hands, different, callous and delicate, but now joined in quiet solidarity. "I was a builder all along." Above them, the wind stirred. It wasn't cold, it was warm, curious, almost grateful. It wound around them like an old song, a hymn of hope. On that rooftop, bathed in the gentle hush of twilight, softened by honesty, they sat side by side, no longer defined by job titles, past wounds, or roles they'd outgrown, just present, just real. Around them, something even more miraculous had taken root. Not a business empire reborn in spreadsheets or IPOs, but a family one forged in compassion, not contracts. A family that chose each other again and again, not out of duty, but out of love. Downstairs, a little girl was curled up, safe, her dreams resting in the lap of someone who never stopped believing in her. Nearby, once cynical employees now laughed like children, their wounds stitched with purpose, not policies. And at the very heart of it all was not a triumphant climax, not a banner waving in victory, but something far braver, redemption. Not loud, not perfect, but true, and that was enough. Because sometimes the most powerful stories don't end with a standing ovation. They end with a quiet decision made in the silence between the people who've been through the storm together to be better than they were yesterday. If this story stirred something in your heart, if it reminded you of someone who never gave up, someone who stood by you when you forgot how to believe, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where are you reading from, and what part of Jack's journey struck the deepest chord in you? Drop your reflections in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, stories that heal, that honor quiet courage, that remind us of the unsung heroes walking beside us, hit subscribe, ring the bell. Don't miss the next one. From my heart to yours, thank you for listening. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never stop believing in second chances. Redemption is always waiting.